Half hour.
And we're live.
Hey, hey.
What's up?
Morning, everybody.
Good morning.
That's it.
That was a long pause right there.
It's good entertainment right there.
Yeah.
I got nothing
You have
intelligent
no
to
banter?
say. Nothing intelligent to talk about.
I'm sure you have something intelligent to talk about.
Well, I mean, once we get into the subject matter, sure, but I don't know.
Yeah, we can't just jump into the subject matter. That would just wouldn't be right.
It's not the way that we roll.
It's not the way.
So you got a big weekend coming up.
Dude, got
talk about that?
Marrying off another child, which is rad. So Ty is getting married. Met a wonderful young lady named Leah, and they've been waiting for this day, and it's in 2 days. They're gonna get married. They got a house they'll move into and all that good stuff. So we're super excited for them.
Happy for you guys.
Yeah, no, we're super excited. I remember a day not too long ago, a couple years ago, when he would emphatically tell his mother and I, there are no good Christian girls in this world. None of them love the Lord. I'm done. And then God threw this one in there, and that, swept him off his feet. So.
The funny thing is, I think there's probably more Christian girls out there saying that right now.
Yeah.
There are no good, godly Christian
Right.
young men out there.
It was funny hearing the boys
Yeah.
say it because, we know how boys
Yeah.
are. But yeah, he believed it. He was like, there's just none of them are real. It ain't legit. Like, I won't be attracted to any of them. And
No, they're a good match.
They're fantastic.
A good couple. I really enjoy.
Yeah, they seem to work.
they're both so just eccentric, like perfectly eccentric too. They both wear trench coats and funky boots, and then strap like knives to their boots. And
Did
like
she wear a boot knife too?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
And when
Oh,
you
I
see
didn't
them
know
walk
that.
down the road, like holding hands
Yeah.
together, it's just
It
like
makes sense.
Like, how in the world did this couple find each other? They're perfect. They're perfect.
Yeah, I didn't understand they had some kind of a thing on the wedding invitation about what to wear, and I don't have a clue what I'm supposed to wear. It was like 14th century Shakespearean.
They
I'm going to have to dig those clothes out of the closet.
I don't remember what it said.
they
but I'm
like
thinking,
Victorian.
I don't know what it means.
Steampunk. Just go steampunk, Brent.
How much
just kidding.
steampunk stuff do you think I have in my wardrobe
I don't
right now,
think you
dude?
have any. I just thought I
Yeah.
would say
Do
that.
you have a top hat?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Well,
of course. Yeah.
Just wear
No.
wear your best sweats.
You actually have a top hat?
Wear your Crocs.
Oh, that's what I was going to wear. Is just some stretchy pants and my Crocs.
There you go. That'll be fun.
Yeah.
Ty would
sounds-
wear
yeah.
sweats to actually get married in if he could. The dude wears sweats like every day of his life.
Really?
Yes, he's a sweats guy. He
More
hates,
like
jeans and
workout
stuff.
sweats. Not the old
Around the house?
Kind of
or
wears
in
the old
public?
thick
schoolies.
cotton ones, does he? All right. All right.
Does he go
And
out
then he
in
like
public in
tucks them
sweats?
into his boots and stuff when he goes out. It's funny. Man.
Classy, classy.
It is. It's rad. Like he doesn't care.
Your table thumping again.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I don't know if it comes through or not, but
No, I'm sure it does. Doing my thumpy thump. So yeah, so big weekend. So super excited. Another one down. We'll just have one that's not married. So
Yeah.
which is I don't think he ever will be at this point.
And you'll have an empty nest as well.
Yeah. Yeah, we've
Sweet.
tried that multiple times and
Yeah.
it hasn't panned out, but it should pan out after this one. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Exciting. How about you guys? Anything big going on?
Business as usual in our world, I
Just
think.
make something up.
Make something up.
Yeah.
All right. We won the lottery.
Did you? Did
Yeah.
you see how big it is?
Yeah, we got the $1 billion jackpot in the
it's like
lottery.
1.3 billion.
he's resigning as pastor tomorrow.
It's like, what are you gonna do with that, dude? Like you win it. Like, what are you gonna do with it? So much money.
I actually have thought, not that I would ever win the lottery, but just the way my analytical brain works. I have thought about, like, if I do win $1 billion, what would I do?
Yeah, totally.
I have a plan.
For
Wow.
$1 million,
$1 billion. Well, I have a plan
For
for
$1
$1
billion.
million. I have a plan for
they would be two different plans.
like $1 million is not really life-changing money these days. I mean,
I agree.
It could be. but
it's not what it was.
it would take some
20
work
years
for
ago.
$1 million
You're right.
to be totally life-changing.
Yes.
Right.
Well, especially the taxing that goes on
Right.
with it.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah. So, like, you get a quarter. Like, if you take the lump sum, you get like a quarter of it, or 30% or something. is
Yeah,
your
right.
lump sum payout.
Yeah.
So anyway, I have a plan for $1 million. I have a plan for $5 million, and then I have a plan for $10 million and more.
Yeah. Good. Just being a good steward.
Right. You never know.
Preparing.
I have a plan. Like if I find an extra 20 in my wallet,
Yeah.
that's about it.
If I find a 5 on the ground, like, what am I going to do with that? Get all excited. Yep. Fun.
Yeah.
Where did we get this topic that we're talking about today? I'm glad I asked you before we started because I thought this was a listener request, and it's not.
No, I was listening to a podcast. Jared Wilson has one called For the Church, and they were talking about youth pastors in general and kind of the things that they thought, problems they had with youth ministry and youth pastors and kind of that whole subject. And it made me think about all the different kinds of pastors.
You mean
that are
junior
out there.
varsity?
Sure.
On their way to varsity.
Yeah. Second string pastors versus the first string.
Just go make all your mistakes on these youngins.
Yeah. Anyway, they were just
which I think we've all done, right?
Oh, we all went through that, Frank.
Yeah. Anyway, that was the topic that came up. But then it made me think there's all these different pastors out there in churches today. And how did this happen? And what does it all mean? And what do we do with it? It's just kind of.
Yeah.
So, that's where it came from.
Biblical,
Yeah.
Why do we do it? Because it is common now.
If you don't like these topics, by the way, you can send in better ones.
If you're like, they're
There you
doing
go.
another pastor one, which we don't care about because we're not
I thought you were going to
pastors.
say if you don't like him, you could tune out. But I like
No, tune in
how
because
you
it's
try
going
to
to be
redeem that. And
it's going to be
send us
awesome.
better topics.
But it was interesting to me because I'm a kind of we're all students of the church and to see kind of the way the church has evolved over the years and just the way we do things is interesting to me. And this is one of those things that's a bit of a head scratcher.
It is interesting, and it's common. So like it's become more common to have a bunch for each local congregation to have subdivisions of pastors. There's a lot of pastor titles out there now, more so than I ever remember. It just didn't seem to be so crazy. So let's start there. I asked you guys to make a list of the ones that you've seen, the ones that you've heard. You said you came up with like 30, which is close to 31,
right?
Which is close to an ice cream reference.
31 flavors.
31 pastors.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference of what flavor of the 31 flavors that you like?
Just
off
straight,
topic for just a second.
Give me straight
Oh,
vanilla.
that's your
Like
top.
that, I'm playing that way.
That's
Give me straight
pastors.
vanilla.
No, I'm talking about ice cream.
If it's a really good cookie dough, then I'm going with that. So like, don't judge me because of the company. Ben & Jerry's just has the best. Once in a while, I'll go grab a pint of Ben & Jerry's chocolate chip cookie dough. Their cookie dough is the best. It's just big chunks. It's layered throughout frequently. They don't like cheat you on it. It's legit, man. Otherwise, just give me vanilla.
Brent, do you have a 31 flavor that you probably don't like ice cream?
I don't really like ice cream.
Brent likes
that
bubble
much.
gum, where the bubble gum's all frozen and.
I suffer
swallow it.
from something I call analysis paralysis. So 31 flavors is overwhelming to me.
Can't
Can you
decide.
even remember the last time you've been to 31 flavors to Baskin Robbins?
Probably as a kid.
Yeah, me too. It's been ages.
I really don't like ice cream that much. It's fine, but it's not good for me.
I'm not a big
and
ice cream.
it's,
I'm an ice cream fiend.
Are
you
you?
eat it every
night.
What's
Yeah.
yours, dude?
So when I was a kid, the bubble gum at Baskin Robbins was my ice cream.
When it's frozen?
Right,
It's
yeah.
so frozen that you swallow it. Like you can't
No, I would
chew
save it, and then I'd have a whole mouthful of bubble gum after I ate the ice cream.
Are you serious?
Yeah, heck yeah.
That's kind of rad.
Yeah. What happens if you swallow that much bubble gum? It might kill you.
And then like all the dye, like all the color
Right, yeah.
from the bubble gums
Right,
would
your
like come
paint.
off on your fingers
Right.
and everything because it's
Right.
anyway. Yeah.
But so I moved away from that. As an adult, I like Breyer's Neapolitan. That's my go-to. I mean, I haven't really met an ice cream that I don't like, but
sherbet.
Sure, boy.
Anyway, sorry for
Sherbet.
the digression there.
Okay. When's the last time you've been to 31 flavors? We still have one, right? By
Yeah,
Fred
but
Meyer.
Fred, I think Jill and I went there a while back. I don't know, maybe a year ago. I don't know.
I remember going to Cold Stone one time, and I just felt like I'd done something wrong.
Really?
It was too much. It was
Everyone boasted on that.
It was good, but after 3 bites, I was what have I made a huge mistake. It was just too much food.
So when I go and when I feel like an ice cream, we will go to Goodies.
Yeah.
And I will get their Oreo cookie in the homemade waffle cone. So the waffle cones they make with their
I do the waffle cones there.
It's insane.
I'll do like usually Mary and Berry at Goodies.
Do you get
I like
the
fruity
waffle
ice
cone
creams.
though?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
man.
Got to do the waffle cone.
I think that's why I do it is
Yeah.
really just because of the cone. And when they just come out and they're warm, it's legit.
Yeah. Yeah. We lost a couple. We had 3 viewers, now we're down to 1. So maybe ice cream didn't resonate with everybody.
I wonder why. I'm about ready
Ask
to
us
leave.
if we care.
I'm about ready to leave.
No, you're not, dude. You love the topic. Okay, let's go. 31 flavors of pastors, man. Why do we have so many different pastors in the church? Let's name some. What are some of the ones you guys have seen?
Just for the record, I just went local. I just went to the local churches that are here
You went to the
around
sources.
us, and just thought, what do we see locally? And I only had 17, but I didn't branch out to
You guys
beyond
both got more than me.
beyond Central
Yeah.
Oregon. So Yeah. I mean, some of them are obvious, like, you got lead pastor or senior pastor. Those are pretty, normal to see.
Yeah.
Those are very common.
And then you'll sometimes hear like teaching pastor or preaching pastor,
Right.
that type of thing.
All those are on my list.
Yep, I got
Yeah.
those.
Head pastor, I also have
I got
on my
that.
list.
Oh, head,
Yeah.
lead. Those are semantic. I mean, that's kind of the
Right.
Yeah, and then of course, then you start moving down to the second string stuff with associate pastor or assistant pastor, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And then you have the weird executive pastor, administrative
Yeah, I
pastor.
got
Got
all
that
that
one.
on my list.
Those are both in there now.
Yeah.
I don't
Lay
know.
pastor, of course.
You
Oh,
just knocked out the top 9 on my list right there.
All right.
Yeah, those. Yeah, I'm with you on all those. So
Yeah.
we're all together.
Oh wait, one counseling pastor. That's in my top 9.
I've got that
You
in
can
there
say that,
too.
so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, youth pastor, obviously, worship
Yeah.
pastor,
Yep.
children's pastor, small group pastor or community pastor,
Got all those.
creative arts pastor. That
Yeah,
one
I
was
have that
kind
one.
of
That's on my
kind of
list.
funny to
That's
me.
an important one.
What are you? I'm sorry, but what are you pastoring?
Well, they're making
creative arts.
They're creating coloring books of the pastor, and
That's
they're
what
in
that-
charge of that.
That has happened.
that
in
would be a
churches.
creative art.
That has happened. Yep.
Anyway, I've got discipleship pastor,
Yep.
family pastor. I saw this one locally, refuge pastor.
Oh.
Don't know what that means, but the pastor of refuge, not
Okay.
refuse, but refuge. And then this one was also good, the justice and mercy pastor.
Ooh,
I found that one too. So
I've never heard that one.
those are just the local ones that I found.
But I guess that makes sense in our kind of social justice
Yeah.
age that you would have a pastor of that.
yeah.
Did you guys, either of you guys, look into the number of agents that they're? That's a good one.
Yeah.
I like that whole class that's been created, like agent. Anyway,
Yeah, we know some agents.
We did meet some people recently that they don't like to be called pastor. They prefer to be called agents. And that was kind of a Men in Black
Yeah.
weird thing.
and they're really cool. We really like these.
Yeah, we do
people,
like
so
them, but
if
I've
you're
never-
watching, like,
I've never heard agent
with you.
before. So
yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty funny. Chad, what are some of the ones that he didn't name off?
Did you say young adult pastor? Get that one on the list, or college pastor? Or I've heard one. And these are all ones that like I have heard before. I didn't go searching, but there was one years ago, a church I knew that had a next generations pastor. So that was kind of basically a fancy way to say youth pastor or young adult or college pastor, kind of all together. Let's see, outreach pastor, singles pastor.
Did one of you say pastor of vision?
So
And mission?
He did, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I got two on my list are pastor of preaching and vision.
Okay.
I knew somebody that held that title, and then someone who was the senior minister of word and worship,
Well, heck yeah.
and then probably maybe one of our favorites, pastor emeritus.
Oh, dude, is
I made
that?
my list.
We know a pastor
I know,
emeritus.
yeah.
We have a pastor
We
emeritus
have
here.
a pastor America, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
wears a cape.
No capes.
So there's a lot.
Yeah.
And honestly, like the majority of your list, you're like, these are real and common.
Yeah.
Like these are pretty normal in churches. So you very rarely come across a church where you just see someone titled a pastor, or even a few guys
Right.
titled a pastor. There's always a specification, a qualifier
Right.
to what kind of. So
No, when we go to conferences and things like that, they always want us to fill out what we are.
yes,
And the choices are
Lead. Yes, or
associate,
senior or whatever.
senior,
Yeah.
that kind
Yeah.
of thing. There's never, I mean, they don't have stuff like, some of the weird ones, but so I always just put other pastor.
yeah,
Yeah.
pastor.
Yeah.
Pastor.
I feel like,
So there's a lot of variations and subdivisions of pastor in the church today. How many does the Bible?
Well, but before we go there, do you have any on your list that we didn't have?
No,
on
you
ours?
guys hit them all. My list
Yeah.
was shorter than both
Yeah.
yours because I kind of went for just like the main ones, and it was about 12. And you read them off your list, and yeah, you had
All right.
those too. So there's a bunch. How many did you have on your list?
I got 30.
Okay, so let's just say there's 30. There's probably more out there
Sure.
than we know about. Let's just say 30. How many pastors does the Bible talk about?
I mean, I think you could
One.
argue two.
Yes, that's what I put. That's a correct answer.
That's what it's, and some people would probably argue three, but I think two is probably the most correct answer.
Jesus and then everybody else.
Well, I was thinking of
Oh,
the two
yeah, you
words
do
that
that.
are so you've got episkopos and you've got presbyteros. The two words that are elder and overseer are the two that are very commonly used to describe that role. Pastor is the one that's actually, some would argue it's not even ever describe it. It's more of a verb. Like this is the elders and the overseers
to
pastor people. They
Right.
shepherd people.
That makes sense.
But it's not really a title that we even use. So when it comes to that, what we think of as a lead pastor position in a church, the two words that I would say would be elder and overseer. And of course, some translations use bishop and things like that. But
Right.
but the two Greek words are, that's it.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, yeah.
But that's not necessarily talking about two different roles.
No, same role. So
there's kind of
basically,
one role
Yeah.
of a pastor.
So here's the $1,000,000 question, if that's true, and I totally agree with you. That is true, what Brent just said. It's that simple. I was just going to go with, I was going to go ahead and allow pastor to be bishop elder, which it is. We all believe that.
Yeah.
And then we've got a senior pastor. There is a senior pastor in the Bible.
Which he is actually called the shepherd.
He is.
So he's the
the
only
chief
one
shepherd.
that has
the good
the
shepherd.
title
Chief
pastor,
shepherd.
because the word pastor and shepherd are the same
yeah.
word in the
Yeah.
Greek and in Spanish, interestingly, but
So,
not in English. Yeah.
so knowing that that's true, how did we get to this place? A normalized,
get here?
How did we get
normalized. How did we get
This is not my beautiful
what
church.
are we doing? How has this become common in the church to have all these subdivisions and categories of pastors?
Well, I don't think in a small church you don't have all these titles of pastors. You might have some of them.
There's some that have
some.
become like staples. Like this is just the way that you form a church, as far as a
Right.
youth
Like you
pastor
might
and
have
a
a,
worship pastor.
Right.
These are
senior pastor, associate pastor, whatever. But I think kind of
Even in small
the
churches.
bigger a church gets, maybe the more necessary
Okay.
it is to subdivide, some of these.
That's one of the reasons
these
that I
duties.
actually put down is like maybe like where did this start
Yeah.
and like how did we get here? And I thought the same thing. The church, the growing church, the church that grows so big that you have to start creating categories to be more manageable with
Right.
what it is that you have, or more specified,
Right.
more focused.
Well, if you have a mega church, for example, with a big staff, maybe you've got, a staff of 20, 30, 50, whatever. I think in order just practically to manage that staff, you got to divide up the duties. And I don't think any of us would say there's anything inherently, wrong with the church, being big or
Sure.
having a title mega.
Sure.
But it certainly creates some dynamics that you don't have to deal with, in a smaller church.
Well, and even some of these titles are helpful. But you could call it the director of children's ministry,
Right.
or the staff administrator. But throwing the word pastor in there that's become very common, and it gets a little confusing, I think.
Well, you're just getting right down to it now.
I'm sorry. I'll wait, but to answer your question, I do have an answer to what you just asked.
What are some? How did we get here?
There's been a strategy in the church, basically, to divide everybody up into different groups, like-minded groups. Singles, parents, old people, whatever it is. And so when you divide the church into all these different categories, it starts to make sense that you need somebody that specializes in being able to shepherd
For sure.
these single people over here,
Right.
and these so I think that's part of maybe why it's gotten to
So
where
a lot of
gotten.
it's the
Yeah.
specialization
Yeah.
that we've created in
Right.
churches that not necessarily needs to be there.
Which again,
we find it helpful when it actually may not be completely helpful. Because you kill integration.
Yeah.
And there are times when I think it makes sense for people that are
for
going
sure.
through the same thing to team up and do something. But in general, when you look at what the church is supposed to be,
Yeah.
it's multi-generational.
Yeah.
It's all everybody's together.
Like if there's an ice cream lovers ministry, like that makes sense. Right?
I would have that.
Chad
I
would be
the
the
ice cream
pastor, the ice cream pastor.
I would. Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
Have
Size.
you ever heard of a church that has like an old people pastor? Because like you can't call it, like senior pastor doesn't work for like the old person's pastor.
So yes and no. So like I don't think I've ever heard of that title, but one of the popular trends in a lot of churches these days is to have a contemporary service
Right.
and a traditional
Yeah.
service. And in that, a lot of churches have brought two different guys in
Sure.
to basically handle those services.
Yeah, that makes
So
sense.
I guess that would be that, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I've just never heard of like the retirement pastor or,
Well,
whatever.
Captain America's the retirement pastor. Yeah.
The pastor emeritus is the
Yeah,
retirement
pastor
pastor.
emeritus.
All right.
The other thing I would just answer that same question again is the way that we've bought into the idea that we have to have paid professionals.
Yep.
To do everything. So if you're going to have somebody that's going to be counseling people, you need to bring in somebody that's specialized,
Right.
Trained in that, educated in that, and then they
sure.
become that pastor. And so because we bought into this idea that the whole church doesn't necessarily team up together to do these
Yes.
things. You have to get the right guy in there.
Only the qualified.
Specialized title.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Which there is qualifications for elder /
Right.
pastor in the Bible. Like it's not just anybody. Like you have to be qualified, or John MacArthur will look at you and say disqualified. So like that's real. But the way that you're talking about is more in a worldly way, not the biblical way, where we go through it. Education is king, pretty
Yeah.
much. Not gift or calling, which is a whole other subject of error, right? So anyway,
Well, I think in a lot of denominations, you just go get your credentials. You go
No,
through
that's exactly.
an education process that's
Exactly.
outlined by the denomination and take classes or whatever, and then you get credentialed.
Yes.
and you're in.
Which is what the world does whenever they go into an occupation
Right.
or a field
Yeah.
of some sort. Is you go, you get educated in it, and then you get the piece of paper that tells you you're educated in
Right.
it, and then you go get the job. And we've kind of done that.
And
what
there are
we've
some like I was in a denomination, years and years ago, where like you would get your credentials and you'd become licensed, but then ordination was another step.
Mm-hmm.
So then like you were super credentialed or something when you became ordained.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Along those lines, one of the reasons I feel like we've done this is the same thing. I think we've followed the world in what success is and how
Sure.
to achieve success, and we've done that in the church. So I believe we've bought like corporate templates,
Right.
and I think that's maybe to me the way we have found ourselves in this situation. Like maybe that may be the greatest reason is that we look at these corporate templates of how a business becomes successful and runs right when it gets
Right.
big, and we go, well, if it works there, it can probably work here, and in ways it does. There's things that you can bring across the board,
Sure.
and they're going to do what they do. But
The
I think
bigger
that's
an organization or church grows, the more some of those things on a practical level make some sense.
for sure. And so we end up with this tier from the top. You've got a CEO, and
Right.
you've got the board of trustees, and which you call the elder board or whatever. You can make your analogies or draw your parallels. But so anyway, I think that's kind of the biggest reason we've seen it to be
Sure.
a commonality now in running a church is because churches are trying to be big.
Right.
And if you want to be big, which equals successful, this is the way businesses do it.
It's a necessity,
So we can
almost.
do it too. So we've started
Yeah.
parsing out roles and offices to match the corporate template.
Yep.
I don't know. I could be wrong. I know that's kind of an oversimplified.
No, I think you're right on.
Yeah. So here's the question that I think naturally follows that for me is just because it's not in the Bible, 31 flavors of pastor, but just one or two, does that mean it's wrong?
Maybe not inherently wrong,
Okay. Okay.
but
Good answer, Chad.
but problematic.
Way
I
to
think,
cover that,
you know?
bro.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, problematic.
Okay.
For all the reasons that you just said.
Someone can
You know.
make the case, right? Like, even when we look at the church, we see things that the church does, but the Bible doesn't necessarily go through and prescribe
Right.
the way that they have to be done. And that's part of the reason why we have so many different churches and denominations, whether it's the way that they do communion or when they do communion or how often they do communion or whatever. You can take almost anything that the church does and find like major variations of it because we
Right.
have freedom. Like the freedom is assumed in how we get to actually do those things. And I could see maybe someone making the argument that like that's all we're doing here.
Sure.
I mean,
Well, I think
I
like
don't know.
we all came out of youth ministry, and I think we would probably all agree that like there's a disconnect in just kind of modern youth ministry. That okay, let's segregate this group of people over here. Run them through the children's ministry and middle school ministry and high school ministry and college ministry, and then at some point say, okay, now go be a part of big church, and there's a total disconnect
Totally.
there. And maybe the intention of it was good to be able to kind of give some specialized teaching to a group in a way that they could understand.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes sense. And so is it wrong to have, children's and youth ministry and college ministry? No, but have we done it in a way that's problematic? Probably so.
Yeah, for sure.
And you could look at that with, let's take the seniors and put them over here and let all the old people hang out together because of their affinity for, one another and whatever. And it just creates, another disconnect of the church not being integrated. And one of the beautiful things about the church if we're doing it the right way, is the integration of the old and the young and everybody in between.
I agree.
And so when we have all these segregations and divisions and, pastors for this group and pastors for that group, we tend to miss the mark. And again, I don't think it's wrong to say, hey, you oversee this group over here and you oversee that group, over there, and give them some specialized attention. But, the way that we've done it, and we, like just the American church as a whole for years, I think has contributed more to it being problematic than it has being helpful.
No, the generational parsing that we've done, thinking it was a good idea originally, like we have definitely felt like the effects of it. The church has felt and seen the effects of it, and a lot of it's our own fault from this kind of a strategy where people don't know where they belong in the church.
Right.
There's not cross-generational community and relationships going on, which are necessary
Absolutely
for a healthy church to function and for our lives.
Yeah.
And we've killed all that and called it bad.
Right.
And don't even get me started on that. And by the way, if you are called to be a pastor and you're God has given that to you and it's primarily to young people, that is varsity.
Yeah.
That's not junior varsity like that. That is varsity. So it's not stepping stone.
Yeah. But
so.
there is an aspect where
we've
created these categories and said you can be a pastor for this group of people, but you wouldn't necessarily be a pastor for anything else. And at some point you might just say, well, is that even a pastor? And then maybe they're just gifted and using their gifts in the church to disciple some people and to come alongside them and to help shepherd them.
Yep.
Sure. But when you look at what a pastor is in the Bible, I mean, if you have to specialize it down to this little certain area of something that's not even really clearly laid out in the Bible, maybe let's just not call it pastor.
So we are going to get to that
Yeah.
when it comes to what does the Bible say a pastor is, and because that takes care of where you're going right now. You're right. In some ways, we're completely cheapening and we're playing games, which is why we named it this. We're playing games to suit us or to suit the corporate agenda or whatever you want to call it, by making different things pastors or removing the responsibility of a pastor in other areas. It has hurt us. It has not helped us.
Even I can't remember the dude's name. I think he started the Boy Scouts.
Couldn't tell you.
Guy from Britain.
You said Boy Scouts, so I'm out right
well, basically, there was a point where he noticed all these young men that were fatherless or that didn't have a good godly father in their lives, and so he started this movement to try to basically disciple them. And so it was a Christian organization when it started. And so when you think about youth ministry in general, it's kind of an odd. You don't really see that laid out in the Bible. You see that responsibility given to the family and the father.
Uh-huh.
But when you don't have that, now you've got this need, this void
there's a gap to
that
fill.
the church can come in and fill. I mean, it's just kind of weird that we even have youth pastors and youth ministry the way we do right now. But again, you see the vacuum that's been created by a lack of godly dads and this need that's there. So I kind of get why we do it and why we have it. But then you have the flip side of that as to where you've got these parents that are in the church saying, raise my kid well, make sure they turn out well.
That's exactly.
And they're dumping it off on somebody. They're abdicating their responsibility to somebody else. So I can see why, if there's nobody else there to do it, why the church has an obligation to step up and do it.
Right.
But in general, that should be kind of the exception, not the rule.
Agreed.
But that maybe is a whole different subject. But it's weird that we've created some of these categories.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're not questioned. Everybody is playing by these rules in their church, whether they're a conservative person that we would say is solid in the word and knows their word well. Nobody's questioning these tactics. Everybody just does them. It's just what we do.
Yeah.
And you're right. I think it's worth people sitting down and questioning some of the harm that they may be doing. And we could stand for some reformation in this area,
Absolutely.
which is, I think, is why you thought it was important enough to talk about today.
Yeah, because I think if the church were to just kind of maybe be more of a multicultural, everybody together, it seems like maybe we've specialized it at the point of almost harm.
Yeah.
No,
agreed.
Whereas maybe there's a better way to do this.
Yeah. And even to take that thought a little bit further, and maybe you'll get into this, but we attach the title pastor to things that aren't pastoral roles.
Well,
like everybody's a pastor. Like in some churches,
if everybody's a pastor, then no one's a pastor.
Right.
Let's get into it right now. So what have we done by doing this? I mean, a lot of churches have at least 5 of these. Some of them have more. It almost seems so like, gosh, I don't want to do this. Worship pastor.
Right.
Like, why have we started doing that? And when we say worship, like, worship's so much bigger than what we make it. That's a whole nother conversation and problem. But obviously, going with what everybody knows it to be, worship means music.
Music pastor.
Okay. Why does there need to be a pastor of music? Why can't you have someone that just leads music because they're good at leading music?
Because that's not trendy.
Okay.
to have it like a director, or even like I would even question, like, why does that person even need a title?
Okay. I'm down with that too.
Or do they need a title at all? Can't they just go and provide music for the church, and we can be thankful for it, and we don't have to call them anything other than their first name?
Well, gosh, Chad, that's pretty hardcore and mean, bro.
Yeah.
No, I'm just that's
Actually, there's something cool if you find somebody who is a real pastor. I mean, when I say real pastor, I mean somebody who's called, qualified, biblically defined as a pastor, who is able to lead the music as well. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And it's hard to find.
I think it's a unicorn.
But they're not a pastor because they're leading music.
No, they're a pastor first who happens to be able to
lead
do
music,
this
yeah.
because the theology, the whole methodology that goes on there.
There's a lot of pastoral teaching moments that can go on out of the music of the church.
Yes.
But this is different.
It is, but I wish that occurred more often,
right.
because I think that actually is pretty cool and can work.
Yeah,
so,
agreed.
but when you have somebody who's not qualified, not called, but they're talented musically and they're able to sing well and organize a group and all that, but they're not really pastoral and they're not theologically sound.
Right.
To put them in that role and say that they've got to kind of lead the church in this way and say a lot of stuff on Sunday mornings that may or may not be even good.
Right.
That's pretty sketchy, and that's what you see happening in most churches nowadays. That they're actually almost talking as much or more than the person preaching that day, and that's.
So why are we doing this? Like, I don't even know if any of us are able to answer that because this is such a foreign thing to each of us. Like, we don't understand. We don't do this here, and I don't think we're going to anytime soon. We kind of don't get it.
Yeah.
But how has this become a thing where anytime anybody leads or maybe kind of like heads up the charge in any kind of a ministry or subdivision of the church, they have to be a pastor? Like,
well, maybe I don't know where this.
And this is where we've cheapened what a pastor is.
Like, there are some important roles in the church. It's important to have musicians that are talented and that do a good job. And
even to have a paid
church.
Staff person that head that up would not be a wrong thing.
Right.
I don't think.
I wouldn't say it's important, but it's not wrong.
Yeah. But it's important to have somebody that can put a children's program together. If that's like those
So we have one.
They're important roles, right?
We have a gal named Debbie that does that. She kind of heads up. She's led the charge. She's good at it. She's gifted at it. She's got a desire for it. I don't think it's ever crossed our mind once to say, okay, you're Pastor Debbie.
Right.
You're pastor.
But again, you might call her the children's ministry director or something like that. I mean, if you
that
need
makes
a
sense
title,
because she's directing.
Yeah,
she's leading.
That's a helpful title to differentiate between these roles in a way that makes sense.
Most people aren't doing that. They're putting pastor on anyone who leads anything.
And maybe we don't differentiate all that much between pastor and leader. In some contexts or some churches, like if you're leading something, you're a pastor of that.
Sure.
Well, even the weirder thing is at that point when you've got all these people that have the title pastor, they still wouldn't call them elders, and they wouldn't sit in on an elder meeting.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be on an elder board, but they still carry the title pastor.
Well, in a lot of churches they would, Brent.
Well, I'm surprised how many I run into. I mean, I was having conversations with a guy recently he's the director of the children's ministry or the youth college group. I can't remember what his title is, but he's called a pastor, but he doesn't go to any of the elder meetings. He has no say in any, and it's very strange to me. Again, It's like, why do you have that title then if you're not really, I don't know. I mean, I think he is shepherding those kids. Don't misunderstand that. But it's I don't get it. It's weird. It's very confusing.
Let's say that a local congregation has multiple pastors with a qualifier in front of it, a specific designation for it, and they're all called to be pastors. Okay, what does that do? Is that okay, or is that have its challenges as well?
Again, I don't think it's inherently wrong.
Yeah, sure.
But it certainly can have some challenges.
What are some?
There's probably a way to do it well.
Okay.
But it seems to be maybe more problematic.
Okay.
I mean, you could actually argue we do that. We have 3 pastors that we don't have any other
But I'm
thing
not
added
like,
to our name. But as far as
I'm not
we
like
have,
the pastor of mission and vision, and you're the pastor of teaching, and you're the pastor of counseling and shepherding. We don't do that. That's what I'm talking about.
We don't, but like when it comes to vision, for instance, we would lean heavily on you because that's more of an area of your gifting. Now we don't designate you as that guy.
That's my point.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, because we're co-pastors, we're all the same as far as
This is kind of what I'm getting
equality.
at.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I believe it does create in the mind of the people like there's an
Hierarchy,
authority
yeah.
thing. There's a
Yeah.
hierarchy. You're still making somebody something, and it's understood. Like the title says something. If someone has a card and they hand it to you, and there's 4 other pastors in that church with that guy, but it says senior pastor, people know that that's the dude.
Yeah,
like that's the guy I go to for these things. He's the top one. Someone the other night referred to us as the Trinity, because there's 3 of us, the Trinity of pastors. It's like, all right, like who's the first person in the Trinity? Like who's the second? Who's the but we do this by the qualifiers and the designations that we put, even when someone is qualified.
Sure.
Well, and people, we've had this model for 11 years now from the beginning.
Eons.
But people still want who's in charge, who's the lead guy, who do I talk to?
Give us a king.
They want the king. They want somebody that's actually identified as that top dog. And it's
Who's
funny.
the first person of this Trinity?
That's people still want to know that and are still trying to figure it out and find
That's
it.
what I guess I don't like. Like you said, Chad. Like it's not like it's like a problem, like sinful or something for us to have those qualifiers if we're qualified to be pastors.
Right.
Those designations, but this is a downside to me. Like it's a problem with feeding that thing that people want that's not biblical. Like there's one shepherd that always, no matter where you go, that's the senior pastor, and we need to. I just believe there's ways that we can help people to learn that, or at least rebuke them into acknowledging, and learning that. So I don't know.
Well, and we've mentioned this before, but the truth is that there are times when it's going to be best to go to you for something, times when it's going to be best to go to you, and sometimes best to go to me, depending on what we're talking about, because we have different roles, different giftings, different things we're good at. And so that part makes sense. And that's where some of these little titles can probably be helpful designations, even though we don't do that. Yeah. But most people know, like if there's something administrative that needs to be answered, they're not going to go to David. And
if
rightly
they do,
so. Yeah,
they're going to find themselves in a hole.
But I wouldn't want to have the title of administrative or executive pastor
because of money,
because then that almost limits what the other things that you do.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you talk about all the things we do as pastors and you try to put a title in there for all those things, it could be a little bit of a long list.
I always joke to our people, like responsible pastor, irresponsible pastor. They're like, that's what my card should say, is like irresponsible. I'm not like, I know that's not a boast, but like irresponsible pastor. I'm not gifted in those things. But it's really easy for people to go to us without titles on our cards or designations and inquire about some help on something.
Yeah.
Right.
And then we direct them to the right person. Like they're like wow, how amazing of a thought is that you just do it that way.
Yeah.
Well, I think the size of our congregation kind of lends itself, obviously, to our model. Again, if you're bigger, you to some extent have to organize in a certain way, just on a practical level.
Sure.
To where it makes sense. And so, again, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with a church, being big or even being called mega.
Sure.
But it does present its own issues and problems and challenges, and it just seems like I don't know that God intended for a church to be 10,000 people.
No, that's part of the reason why then your ecclesiology and just your the doctrine of church growth like means something out of that, is like when you get to a certain size, like what do you do with it? What we're doing these days is we're forcing ourselves to make new categories and fall into these tiers and these structures and these frameworks, because we're not teaching people we're not going out, we're going up.
Right.
And so it's like, all right, well, I guess you guys are all going to suffer some of the consequences of that.
Yeah.
Not that it's horrible in and of itself, but it's just like, pain is optional, and I guess you're just willing to do it. What is the primary role of a pastor biblically? Because again, the whole point here is like we're throwing around the word pastor to anybody and everybody for anything. What is a pastor biblically? What is the primary role of a pastor?
I would just kind of lean heavily on the words that are used in the Greek, and you see overseer and you see shepherd, and so you get this idea of somebody whose responsibility is to kind of oversee what's going on in the church in an authoritative way,
Sure.
And also to be
So
able
that means
to,
practically.
Yep.
But
and then to be able to shepherd, minister to those people.
Yeah.
So we're guiding, we're protecting, we're there's
spiritual oversight.
There is a
spiritual
there is a spiritual aspect, absolutely, to the whole idea of pastoring or shepherding. It's the spiritual oversight, even. So even though there might be practicalities of oversight and practical decisions that need to be made by that responsible party, we're really primarily talking that there's a spiritual guidance that's going on over all of it, right? Jesus says to Peter, like, you love me, like, feed my sheep. That's what I think of. I mean, if you were to summarize the idea, it's that feeding. Well, what are you feeding them? You're feeding them words of life. You're feeding them spiritual food, right? Which is to grow them and to mature them. And I just think that's what a pastor's there to do.
Ministering the word to people, protecting sound doctrine, guarding false teaching. There's so many aspects of that. Providing guidance and counsel to people, praying over people. That's really what a pastor's supposed to do, and supposed to be able to do it for the entire body, that the whole flock that they're overseeing.
Sure.
So again, when you start to get into these specialized things, okay, well, you're the pastor that watches out for that guy over there, and you're the, it gets a little bit.
Right. Or even you're the pastor that leads music. You know what I mean? It's like, like at the end of the day, you're, maybe picking some songs and throwing them together, but like, are you shepherding? Are you feeding sheep? Like, is there that component there?
And having a right biblical understanding informs, who you give the title pastor to and what you put in front of it or behind it.
Yeah.
Well, and ultimately, the elders of the church are the ones responsible to make sure that the music is what it's supposed to be.
They're the pastor.
They're
the
lyrics
overseers.
are correct, and that
that
it fits the vision of the church and the mission of the church, and
even the children's ministry.
Yep.
And what's being taught there, what curriculum. Like they are responsible as pastors for all of it.
Yeah, which does mean sometimes you delegate, because that's the other problem you run into.
Well, this is the argument for plurality.
Yeah, correct.
And not a dude.
Anyway, no,
you were going to say something
I think
else.
we'll get into that more as we go.
I don't know if we're going to.
Well, there's something about coaching coming up.
Okay,
I think so.
Let's do that one. It's become very popular, like trendy. This one actually bothers me, so I'm going to try to not talk about it too much.
If you're a pastoral coach, this is where you might want to tune out.
Yeah, I don't want to come off like a jerk. This one's a head scratcher to me. So it's become very big now. And maybe it's the people that I see going into this field is why it bothers me, because a lot of them are no longer pastors or disgruntled pastors. Right. Anyway, coaches. Pastors now have coaches. This is a real thing that people are not just making money at.
That they pay.
They're making, they're paid to coach pastors. And they're paid well. Discuss.
Well, it's not a head scratcher to me. I understand why it's there and why people are using it and why it's happening. And it's because we've adopted a single pastor model.
And it's broken.
A head pastor model where that pastor has no friends, nobody he can talk to in the church. He's alone. He's isolated. He's responsible to do everything. Everything's on his shoulders. If I was that guy, I would want a coach. I would pay somebody to tell me to come and hold, that I could rest my head in his lap and just stroke my hair and tell me everything's going to be okay.
Yeah. And of course our institutions, that the pastors are coming out of are telling you can't let your guard down and you can't have these relationships with your people and you got to maintain this, you know what I mean? So we go elsewhere and outward and
So there's a presupposition that's broken going into this kind of a model.
Yeah.
I remember years ago I was in a pastor's meeting where there was a guy that came down from Portland to our pastor's meeting, and he was starting this coaching ministry and just wanted to make himself available, which I didn't know the guy, so I'm just thinking who are you and why would I call you? And nothing against the guy, I just didn't know him. Mm-hmm. But also the other aspect of it for me is like I had guys in my life that, if I did need to lay on someone's lap and have them stroke my hair and tell me it's going to be okay, I had guys for that. It's I don't need you for that who I don't know.
I will never do that for you, by the way. Chad, I love you, but no.
We have never done that for each other, and I don't think we ever will. I was just trying to paint
I've
a
never
picture.
laid on Chad's couch.
Yeah.
I was picturing somebody in the fetal position, just sucking their thumb.
Right.
And this coach is going, it's okay. It's going to be okay.
You
can do it.
Is it wrong to be mentored? No. We should all be mentored. But the Bible gives us a prescription for mentoring in the local church that the older people pour into the younger people. And I think it's kind of a myth to think that someone who's not a pastor doesn't have anything to offer to someone who is a pastor.
Yeah.
Right. Like I've had the benefit through my life of older people in the church pouring into me who weren't pastors.
Absolutely.
But they've invested in me and poured into me in ways that have been helpful and beneficial. And that's just the biblical prescription for it. Is it ever wrong to go outside and ask someone to help coach you and mentor you? Probably not. But just the presuppositions going into it that you mentioned of like I can't be friends with people in my church as a pastor,
Or that you literally have to hire a friend.
Right.
That's pretty
Right.
messed
Like
up.
those are kind of wrong.
It's sad. The frustrating thing when I was putting this together and thinking about it, as
Was
set
this
the
part of
thing
what
up.
they talked about? Was the coaching thing?
No, not at all.
Okay, this one I kind of like came to my head, and it's like, oh my gosh,
He
like,
does it. So that guy.
Oh,
never
you're
mind.
right,
Yeah.
right,
So
yeah.
no, they're not going to talk about that because he actually offers that service. But
It's a bummer.
The frustrating thing to me is that when you see how we've overcomplicated the church to the point of ridiculousness at times, where if we did this the way that it just looks like in Acts, you've got the pastors living among the people. The elders of the church are there with them, being ministered to and ministering to others, still overseen, but it's, you're interconnected, your lives, you're known.
Yep.
You're vulnerable, you're accountable, all those things. You've got a single mom in the midst that has kids she needs help with. The church rallies around that person, or a widow. The church rallies around that person together. We don't have specialized groups.
We see it going on. Yep.
We do. I just wish that it could be, rather than separate it all out and all these weird various ministries, that the church just lived life together in a way that was kind of just an organic, natural outpouring of love and care and ministering for each other. You didn't have professionals that were hired to do all the work. Everybody did the work. We were in this together. Yeah. That's the way it's supposed to be.
Absolutely.
And that just simplifies this so much.
It does.
Yeah.
I even think of, like we've got a guy that usually sends us a Monday morning text, and it's kind of like, don't jump off the ledge today, like and encouraging, God's called you to do this. And,
We don't have to pay him to send the text.
we don't have to pay him, right? I'm sure he probably wouldn't even take it if we offered. No. Yeah. And he's not a pastor, but he takes time out of his day to encourage us, and it's a small thing that's not a small thing. It's
Super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, pastoral coaching and ongoing like education, accountability, encouragement, all that stuff looks like this. And again, like that could sound arrogant, like we don't have it figured out, we don't do everything perfectly, but the reason why we've set things up the way we have is because we believe these things and we have thought of the implications, and we've even seen what's just going on around us in other churches and seeing, the natural outworking, a lot of times negative outworking of buying these systems and not thinking them through.
Well, we even talked to some of these guys that are the single pastor model kind of guys that are so discouraged right now, ready to throw in the towel, and we're trying to encourage them to consider a model like this. It's hard to implement.
Yeah.
But man, it solves so many things.
It does blow up the Death Star, right?
It does.
Peyton had that chapter in his book that was like, it seemed radical, and kind of when we're talking about it, I'm like, this isn't that radical to just to go back to simplicity. Right? Clear the board and just go ahead and focus on what the Bible gives us rather than what it doesn't give us.
Right.
It's sufficient. It knows what it's talking about. But that seems so radical because everybody is operating within this framework that we created.
The two enemies of this are ego and money.
So we didn't even go there, and that was one of the anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's seriously, if you're going to try to adopt this model, that means you got to spread the money out between everybody that's there to some degree.
And spread the ego out.
And spread the ego out.
Share the ego.
You can't have that type A guy that's going to be the micromanager that always gets, if you want to get things done, you have to do it yourself. Kind of, that doesn't work.
Correct.
And you have to be able to kind of root for the other guys.
Sure.
And that's not easy to do. Yeah. But man, it solves all the problems that we see other guys struggling with, it seems like.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, I might even take that, kind of a step further. So not only, do we believe in the local church and, that we're all members of it, including the pastors, right? Mm-hmm. We're all sheep. Mm-hmm. But like we spend time with other pastors locally who, we try to encourage and they encourage us. And, just those natural relationships of pastors in our own area that we get to spend time with as well. I mean, like there's a coaching that happens in that maybe isn't super intentional on any of our parts, but just by virtue of relationship and getting together, we help each other in that way. And so, it's a good thing. Like I know so many pastors that are kind of isolated even from other pastors in their area.
Well, it's a competitive thing, right? I mean,
Right.
ultimately, when you're looking at it as a business, like your business needs to be better than the business
Sure.
down the road, or else it costs you on multiple levels. That's one of the things that I think I love about us. And just hearing you say it out loud, I realize now why we have it. Like because we see these things and we don't believe they're right or helpful or a blessing, and we do things the way we do. That's why we have such a heart for other pastors. All of us have, all three of us. None of us are competitive. None of us sit around and like want to see other guys fail so that we can look better. We all have always gravitated towards and networked with other pastors, and this is why. Is because we see so much more than for them than what it is that they're walking in and living in and dealing with because of what they've created.
Well, that was part of my draw to you guys. When we connected.
Yeah, it was
Because
the same way.
What you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a shared value that we didn't know each other to know that we had this shared value, but that was a huge part of my draw to you guys.
And it's because we believe this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, is the reason why we actually have a heart for people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't have anything else. I just wanted to sit and bag on other churches and pat ourselves on the back. So hopefully.
I hope that's not what we're doing.
I don't know what to say to that.
Obviously, I'm being sarcastic. I don't want it to look like that. Like, we are passionate about these things. We are very convicted about these things. And we don't see them as small things. If you notice, we see them as major things or potentially major things with the church. And it's because we love the church.
Well, and we also see this in the Bible. We see co-equal elders.
And there's a lot we don't see in the
every
Bible.
town.
Yeah. Yes.
And it just seems like, do this, try this out, because
Yeah.
we've seen how it works.
Yep.
And again, we didn't invent it. We in some ways stumbled upon it, but we had these biblical convictions. But the fact that it works so well, we want to push that out into other guys' lives that we see struggling and burning out right now. So it's not like we figured it out.
This is old.
We're rad, and we
that's why that book
we
I
learned
referred
it from
to.
others.
Yeah, the book I referred to, blowing up the Death Star, was called Church Zero, and that was the whole point of the title.
Right.
Is like the things we need to reform to and figure out and adjust to aren't because they're new on the market.
No.
They're old things that we simply need to rediscover again.
Yeah.
They're first century things that we just need to trust.
Yeah.
So cool. All right, why don't you pray us out?
You want to pray, Brent?
Sure. Father, thank you just for your goodness to us as pastors. Thank you for your goodness to us in this church. Lord, we are humbled to be able to do what we do. And Lord, thank you that you've really brought this model about. We give you credit for that, not taking it for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And we just pray that that would be an encouragement to anybody that might be listening, maybe struggling. I think of a couple of brothers right now that have reached out to us recently that are kind of at the end of their rope, and just pray that you might help them to implement a model that looks more like this, that might be able to keep them going, keep them running the race and fighting the fight. And so help us to do that, Lord, and just continue to bring more people our way that we can minister to. And thank you for the church. Thank you for the love that you give us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thanks for joining us.